Is the MCU back? That is the big question surrounding the newest film, Thunderbolts. This is the 36th film in the MCU, and that's not including all the other television series you have to watch for homework in order to keep up. But right off the bat, if you're curious, what are the most important things to revisit in order to catch up for this film? I would say Black Widow and also the television series Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You also could potentially rewatch Ant-Man and the Wasp to remind yourself who the character of Ghost is, but I have not rewatched it. I'm not convinced a rewatch would give me any more extra information on that character. But this film is directed by Jake Schreier, who hasn't really directed a lot of feature-length films. I would argue the most important and relevant thing that he did direct is a couple episodes of the Netflix original series Beef. And why I think that is the most relevant is because that series really dives into a lot of trauma and depression, which is really what this entire film is about. I do think it's a little challenging to try to decipher why this film is so good. Is it good because it stands alone on being a good film, or is it just considered good because it's been so long since anything in the MCU has felt watchable? Because outside of films like No Way Home and Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which rely so heavily on the characters we already know and love, this film feels like the only one in stages 4 and 5 of the MCU that I think you can watch with very little context of pre-existing films or television series. And why I think that is because this film contains many characters that already felt underdeveloped. So if you didn't watch Black Widow before watching this film does a great job introducing you to Florence Pugh's character. Yes, the film Black Widow will give you more context, but it didn't really give us that much to work with to begin with. And with all of these characters meeting for the first time within this film, it's really easy for the script to give us proper introductions and fill us in with some of their backstories. And so if this is your first time experiencing these characters, I think you will still be okay with following along with what happens in this film. And with all these characters meeting each other, I think part of what makes this film feel so real is because these actors genuinely feel like they're having a good time. I think lately Marvel has definitely been missing some of that star power that it once had. And that's not to say Benedict Cumberbatch and Chris Hemsworth aren't A-list actors, and I would still consider them more famous than David Harbour and Wyatt Russell, but at least within their respective films and other films within the past two phases of the MCU, it feels like the movies aren't centered around their star power or even their characters. It's felt like for a while that the entire plot of these movies are to progress the storyline of the larger MCU and just introduce us to what's going to happen next. And while Thunderbolts certainly does set up future plot lines and movies, that all feels secondary to its main purpose, and that is to develop these characters. And it certainly helps that this is a proven formula now that works within superhero movies, mostly with Guardians of the Galaxy and the Suicide Squad, where you just take a bunch of B-list heroes, anti-heroes, villains even, and you just team them all up together, having them bond over their shared trauma, and it works because it's relatable. And this film focuses really heavily on the concept of grief and depression, and it certainly helps that we have a bunch of characters within this film that have very clear trauma that we have seen for the past decade or so, and what could be more relatable in our society right now than depression. And why that theme works especially well is because it feels sincere. This doesn't feel like a quippy thing that Marvel is trying to make a joke of. Like, these characters are selling this idea, and it feels so believable. Specifically, Florence Pugh and David Harbour have just the most dynamic chemistry together, which we did see in Black Widow, but I feel like it's especially on display here. I will continue to say to this day how tragic it is that the film Black Widow premiered after the character Black Widow already died. So for these characters that knew her, for her family, her own sister, her father, we didn't get to properly watch them mourn her death, because while we were being introduced to them, we already knew she was gone. And so I do think this film fills in some of those gaps of how much she actually meant to them, but really these are just two great actors that have good chemistry together, bouncing off with this humorous father-daughter dynamic. Wyatt Russell, I also think, is extremely well, and his character in Falcon and the Winter Soldier was one of my favorite arcs that I'm glad is being explored again. And then, of course, you have Bucky, the Winter Soldier himself. And I think I might have mentioned this in my review of Brave New World, but when he appeared on screen for even those 2 minutes, that got the loudest applause for the entire movie. And he has another scene here where he comes to save the day, and I think it was probably the top 3 moments in the movie where the audience just lost it. I just don't think I was aware of how much people loved the Winter Soldier, but it is so clear that he has this star power to him. That certainly helps with a Golden Globes win and an Oscar nomination within this past year. year, but Sebastian Stan absolutely needs to be a key element for the future of the MCU. So while this film works extremely well, utilizing previously underdeveloped characters and developing them further within this movie, I still think Marvel is falling into the same traps it always does, and that is underdeveloping their antagonist. Basically, this movie does what so many of them do, and it just doesn't really care at all who that antagonist is. We jump from A to B to Z with the character development, and it really makes no logical sense how we get there, and it really just shows that they don't really care about that character at all. They more care about our heroes. They care about their storyline. So as long as the antagonist can represent something in their life, that's all the movie is concerned about, and for the most part, it doesn't not work. There's just a couple scenes within the middle that I was rolling my eyes and it took me out of the movie. But the good news is that when we finally get to the climax of what the theme and message is supposed to be, it does work. So it's not a major complaint, and I am confident they are going to further develop this specific character in later films. But what also added to the tone and theme of depression, making it feel more real, is that this film was actually shot on real sets. And it is so noticeable compared to other Marvel green screen films. The humor in this was also far more sincere, and I think that's something that a lot of fans have gotten sick of. I think this Iron Man style of humor that eventually merged into the Guardians of the Galaxy style humor just does not work with every single character within this universe. So while there still are these one-line quips that the MCU loves to have, it does not at all distract from the heavy tone that this film is trying to present. And this film also takes a much more bold approach to this abstract visual storytelling that I will admit, when you think about it too much as far as what this villain is able to accomplish, and this almost separate dimension it leads our heroes to, it does break if you think about it too logically. But when you're in the moment, you are just appreciating that we have this deep visual metaphor that we don't often see in films like this. This film does a great job trying to balance being realistic, but also taking advantage that this is a fictional story with these supernatural characters. And I really do think that finding what that balance is the key for making this franchise continue to be successful. Does this film have Marvel Easter eggs? Yes, but are those Easter eggs important to understanding the story that is within this film? No. Does this film try to set up future storylines for future films? Yes. Do you have to care about those in order to care about this movie? No. And to me, that is the balance that I was looking for. I think someone could walk into this movie not knowing anything about the MCU and still enjoy it. And I also think there is so much more to discuss for all the superfans that care about the extra details. So this movie isn't perfect, but I think it is a step in the right direction for where Marvel needs to go. And as much as I thought I was out with the past few films, this movie somehow brought me right back in. So those are some of my brief thoughts on the film Thunderbolts, and I would love to hear your thoughts if you've seen it. So comment below and let me know what you think, and I will see you next time.